In a world full of rampant corruption, rarely do we see world leaders actually deserving of praise. But one man has consistently put the people's priorities over his own. Uruguay's president, Jose Pepe Mujica, is a former guerrilla fighter inspired by the Cuban Revolution who spent 14 years in prison. But his time spent behind bars didn't deter him from continuing to organize with activists and later rising to power in 2010. And even though I can talk all day about how he's loved by babies, three-legged dogs, and rock stars alike, what he's done in his short time as president should put the world on notice for what real leadership looks like. See, this week, the 78-year-old known as the world's poorest president opened the doors of his own home to Syrian orphans. That's right, up to 100 Syrian children displaced by the civil war will be arriving in Uruguay as soon as September. And according to the AP, Mujica said the orphans could be housed at first at the presidency's summer retreat, a mansion and riverfront estate surrounded by rolling pastures. Incredible. And unsurprisingly, the UN is welcoming this announcement, considering how, according to the organization's own estimates, there are currently more than 2 million Syrian refugees. At this point, you might be wondering where Mujica is going to be staying if he's giving his summer palace away to Syrian refugees. Actually, Mujica is famous for rejecting presidential perks and has decided to reside at his wife's farm for the entirety of his term. But the president's latest generosity is only consistent with his record of amazing charitable work. In fact, just last week, it was announced that Uruguay would also be accepting 5 Guantanamo detainees as refugees. Yes, in a situation where no other country wants to deal with the burden of accepting these alleged terrorists into their borders, Uruguay is stepping up to the plate. And shortly after shaking Obama's hand to seal the deal, Mujica called the detention center, quote, an embarrassment to humanity. Can't really argue with him there. But what got Mujica a nomination for a Nobel Peace Prize was him standing up to the ridiculous and failed war on drugs. See, last December, Uruguay became the first country in the world to entirely legalize marijuana. It's a bold move that the Dutch NGO Drugs Peace Institute called a symbol of a hand outstretched of a new era in a divided world. Mujica declared that legalizing weed in his country will not only dampen the allure of the drug, but has also hailed the substance's regulation as a winning strategy in combating its deadly trade. Perhaps he's realized what the U.S. can't seem to acknowledge, that no matter how much you want to fight the trade, people will always take drugs, and drugs will always exist. So if anything, criminalizing pot only drives up its price and stuffs the pockets of the drug lords. So quick recap here. Mujica's rescuing Syrian refugees, providing humane conditions for Gitmo detainees, and has legalized marijuana. Oh, and did I mention that he's made Uruguay the second country in Latin America to legalize same-sex marriage too? Or the fact that he also donates 90% of his presidential salary to charity so that he can take home the same wage as an average Uruguayan. Yep, it sounds like leaders everywhere should be taking a page from Mujica's book. Because in a world where political leaders are almost always comprised of the global elite, Mujica breaks the mold of our suit-clad oligarchy. It really makes you wonder why Mujica wasn't the first pope from the global south. Oh, right, he's also an atheist.